Imagine an ordinary Monday morning in any office, university, or just a subway car. You grab your coffee, look around, and notice a striking scene. One group of people looks as if they've just personally conquered Mount Everest or won the lottery. They are smiling, their shoulders are thrown back, and some are wearing scarves or hats with specific sports team logos. Another group looks completely different. They are depressed, irritable, their eyes are downcast, as if they've experienced a personal tragedy. And then there is a third group, those who are quietly drinking their coffee, reading a book, or thinking about their plans for the day, absolutely unable to comprehend why the first two groups are acting so strangely. The reason for this emotional divide is a football, basketball, or hockey game that took place the night before. But if we stop and think about it for even a second, the situation seems completely absurd. Why do the mood, self-esteem, and happiness levels of a mature, rational adult today depend on how a group of complete strangers, who are paid millions of dollars, moved a ball across a rectangular piece of turf last night? None of these fans stepped onto the field, none of them drew up the game plan, none of them scored a goal. Their personal lives, their finances, their health haven't objectively changed one bit based on the outcome of that game. And yet, to their brains, this victory or defeat is absolutely real. To understand why this happens and why some people are completely immune to this phenomenon, we need to dive into one of the most fascinating concepts in psychology, social identity theory, and how we, as humans, regulate our self-esteem. We are going to talk about complex things, but I promise we will do it using simple words. Let's start with a very interesting linguistic trick that you've probably noticed, but maybe never paid much attention to. Listen to how fans talk the morning after a massive victory for their favorite team. They say, quote 0, quote 1, quote 2. Think about that word, quote 3. A person sitting in front of a TV with a bag of chips on a couch, thousands of miles away from the stadium, is, in all seriousness, including themselves on the roster of a professional sports team. In psychology, this phenomenon has a very specific name. In 1976, a brilliant psychologist named Robert Cialdini, along with his colleagues, conducted what is now a classic study. They observed students across several large U.S. universities with strong football traditions. Cialdini noticed a pattern. On Mondays, after the university team had won a game, students would show up to class en masse wearing university apparel. The campus would literally be painted in the team's colors. But if the team lost, the amount of logo-branded clothing dropped sharply, and students opted for normal, neutral clothes. Cialdini and his team went a step further and started calling students, asking them about the game results. That's when they statistically proved this linguistic shift. When describing a victory, nearly a third of the students used the pronoun we, artificially tying themselves to the success. Cialdini called this psychological mechanism BIRGing. It's an acronym for basking in reflected glory. So what exactly is basking in reflected glory? It is an unconscious yet highly active attempt by our ego to boost its own value, status, and self-esteem by associating with someone successful. We all do it, and not just in sports. Think about how someone casually mentions they went to the same high school as a famous actor, or how people take pride in their city hosting a massive event. We take someone else's success, something we put absolutely zero effort into creating, and try to pinch off a little piece of it for ourselves. And it works. When a fan puts on the winning team's jersey and shouts, "We are the champions," their brain actually gets a massive hit of dopamine. Their self-esteem gets an artificial spike. They feel like a winner. They feel strong, dominant, successful. And most importantly, it costs them nothing. They didn't have to train to the point of exhaustion for years, suffer injuries, or push their physical limits. The brain has found the perfect loophole: how to get the reward for hard work without actually doing the hard work. But there is a flip side to this coin. What happens when the team suffers a crushing defeat? When they give up the deciding goal in the final minute? In that moment, the fan's psyche faces a serious threat. If yesterday the victory was ours, does that mean today's humiliating defeat is also quote, _9, __? For the human ego, that thought is unbearable. And this is where the second defense mechanism kicks in. Think about how fans' speech changes after a failure. The exact same people who were screaming, "We won!" yesterday are suddenly saying with irritation, They messed it all up again. They have no idea how to play defense. They just embarrassed themselves. Notice that? The pronoun we instantly vanished. It was replaced by the cold, distancing third-person pronoun they. In psychology, this is called CORFing, cutting off reflected failure. This is our self-esteem's instinct for self-preservation. Our ego essentially says, quote, "We urgently sever the symbolic tie to protect our sense of self-worth from taking a dive. We do not want to be stigmatized by a defeat that we have absolutely no control over." But why does our self-esteem depend so heavily on external groups in the first place? Why can't we just evaluate ourselves solely based on our personal actions? To answer this, we need to turn to social identity theory. The reality is that humans are deeply, fundamentally social animals. Our self-concept, our idea of who we are, isn't just made up of our personal traits like being kind, smart, or a good cook. A massive chunk of our I is formed by our membership in various social groups. I am part of this family. I am a member of this profession. I am a citizen of this country. In evolutionary terms, this is completely justified. For millennia, human survival directly depended on belonging to a strong, cohesive tribe. If your tribe defeated its neighbors, you got resources and safety. If it lost, you could die. Because of this, our brains are hardwired to seek out strong groups, join them, and deeply internalize their fluctuations in status. Today, we aren't running around the savannah with spears anymore, but our primal instincts haven't gone anywhere. Professional sports are essentially a simulation of ancient tribal warfare, just with better marketing and merchandise. When a fan roots for a team, the exact same neural circuits light up in their brain that once forced our ancestors to stick with their tribe to survive. This creates what's known as __quote _19__. The line between the individual's personality and the sports club's brand gets completely blurred. However, there is a colossal vulnerability hidden in this strategy. By allowing their ego to tie itself to the successes and failures of a sports team, the fan makes a very risky trade. They are voluntarily handing over the keys to their emotional well-being and self-esteem to complete strangers. Their mood for the next week now depends on which side of the bed a striker woke up on, a lucky bounce of the ball, or a referee's mistake. The fan condemns themselves to an emotional roller coaster, where the euphoria of basking in someone else's glory is inevitably followed by the painful need to cut off someone else's failure. And here is where we reach the most intriguing part. Let's look at the people who remain completely indifferent to sports, the ones whose hearts don't beat faster at the sight of a ball flying toward a net. Popular culture often unfairly slaps labels on them. They are called boring, unemotional, passionless, or even snobs. But modern neuroscience and psychology fundamentally disagree. There is absolutely nothing wrong with these people. They aren't broken. They just have a completely differently calibrated coordinate system for building their identity. People with a low interest in sports spectacles possess significantly less pronounced tribal instincts. Their need to belong to a massive, loud crowd of people in order to feel safe is minimal. Studies show that they have a much weaker, #22 mentality. They are individualists. They don't wake up with the thought that they need to automatically hate another group of people simply because they wear shirts of a different color. But the most crucial difference lies in how they regulate their self-esteem. People who are indifferent to sports have almost no need for the mechanisms of basking in reflected glory or cutting off reflected failure. Why? Because they primarily operate on what is called an internal locus of control. This means their self-concept is stable and rests on their own real achievements, not on borrowed victories. Their sense of self-worth isn't tethered to things that are entirely outside of their control. Their self-esteem depends on how well they did their job, how they helped a friend in need, the painting they created, the book they read, or how they are raising their kids. In other words, things they can directly influence. Because of this, the emotional baseline of these individuals is much more level and predictable. Their ego doesn't swing wildly on the pendulum of someone else's wins and losses. They don't need external vicarious victories to feel complete and successful. At this point, you might ask, but if they aren't getting this powerful emotional charge from sports, does that mean their lives are more bland? Do they not know how to empathize? Not at all. Every person has a specific, limited resource of empathy, our capacity to care and feel for others. The only question is where we invest this resource, how we distribute it. This is known as empathy allocation. A fan directs a huge chunk of their empathy into parasocial relationships, meaning one-sided relationships with people who don't even know they exist. They genuinely ache over a player's injury, cry when their favorite club loses, and burn nervous energy on a television broadcast. These are parasocial investments. A person who doesn't care about sports takes that exact same volume of empathy and channels it in a completely different direction. Psychological studies show that these people often score higher on a trait called quote, 26 __. They invest their energy into direct engagement, places where there is actual reciprocity, where their actions carry real weight and can affect the outcome. They empathize with real social issues. They pour themselves into developing deep, living relationships with their loved ones. They find transcendent meaning, beauty, and emotional peaks in art, music, science, or nature. They prefer to be the creators and active participants of their own lives, rather than passive consumers of someone else's, albeit thrilling, spectacle. By refusing to spend hours of their lives empathizing with someone else's struggle on a screen, they free up a colossal amount of cognitive energy to tackle their own life challenges. They are fully present in their own lives, overcoming their own obstacles and writing their own narrative. And in our modern culture, which is obsessed with consuming entertainment and other people's drama, this conscious focus on one's actual life is almost an act of quiet radicalism. So, what does all of this mean for you and me? The dichotomy between fans and non-fans isn't an argument about who is smarter, better, or living the right way. It is a story about the stunning diversity of the human psyche. It's a tale of two fundamentally different strategies for finding meaning in this complex world. One strategy leans on the ancient power of tribal unity, on the magic of collectively experiencing epic narratives, on the ability to safely vent aggression and feel like part of something massive and victorious. It is a path of deep emotional involvement in a shared destiny, even if it's purely symbolic. The other strategy chooses the path of autonomy. It is the path of building a stable internal core, where self-esteem is insulated from the random chaos of the outside world. It is the path of individual creativity, direct participation in reality, and allocating your empathy only to places where it can bear tangible fruit. Both of these strategies are completely valid. Both help people cope with stress, find joy, and feel alive. But understanding these hidden mechanisms, whether it's our urge to hide behind the word quote, 27 when things go wrong, or our desperation to shout quote, 28 when we win, makes us just a little bit more self-aware. The next time you hear someone loudly discussing last night's game, saying, "We totally crushed them," just smile to yourself. You now understand the invisible gears of the human ego, desperately searching for a piece of success. And if someone asks you, "Did you catch the game last night?" and you honestly reply that you couldn't care less, don't feel awkward. You aren't boring. You aren't broken. You are simply playing your own game. And it is quite possible that the stakes in your game are much higher.